The sound of quiet sobbing drifted through the sunlit cemetery, breaking the stillness of a perfect morning, and Serafina Vale froze mid-step as if the earth itself had whispered her name. She hadn't expected anyone to be here, not today, not at her father's grave, not at this hour when the world usually felt too busy to remember the dead. Yet there it was, raw and aching, the sound of a grown man crying as though his heart had finally given up pretending to be strong. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Verse. Stories like this deserve to be felt and remembered. Serafina stood there, her polished heels sinking slightly into the soft grass, her designer dress brushing against wildflowers that grew untamed around the gravestones. She was a woman who had built an empire from nothing, a millionaire before 35, known for her sharp mind and colder reputation. People often said she had no heart left, that success had replaced it. And perhaps they were right. Because she hadn't visited her father's grave in over 7 years. Not since the night she walked away from everything he stood for. The cemetery looked smaller than she remembered, as if time had shrunk it the way it shrinks memories. Sunlight filtered through tall trees, casting gentle shadows across the worn stones. Birds sang somewhere far off, but near her, there was only that man's quiet grief, echoing against the silence. She followed the sound slowly, her heartbeat growing heavier with every step, until she saw him. A janitor, judging by his faded uniform, sat on the ground beside her father's grave. His shoulders trembled as he cried, his hands clutching a worn photograph as though it were the last thing tethering him to hope. Beside him lay a small plastic bag with what looked like a child's lunchbox peeking out. Serafina's breath caught. This was her father's grave. The name etched in stone, Alistair Vale, seemed to glow under the sunlight, unchanged, eternal. But everything else had changed. Especially her. She hadn't expected anyone else to care. The janitor didn't notice her at first. He was too consumed by whatever storm raged inside him. His tears fell freely, darkening the soil near the headstone. There was something painfully real about it, something unguarded that made Serafina feel like an intruder in a sacred moment. For a second, she considered leaving. This wasn't her world anymore. She belonged in glass offices and high-rise buildings, not here among broken memories and forgotten promises. But her feet refused to move. Instead, she stood there, watching him, feeling something stir inside her chest that she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was heavier than that. It was recognition. The man finally noticed her when her shadow fell across the grave. He looked up quickly, startled, his eyes red and filled with embarrassment, as if he had been caught doing something he wasn't allowed to do. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to compose himself, but the pain lingered in his expression. Serafina didn't speak immediately. She simply looked at him, then at the grave, then back at him again. Questions filled her mind, but none seemed appropriate for this moment. Why are you here? How do you know him? What right do you have to grieve? But instead of questions, she felt something else rising. Memories. Her father's laughter echoing in their small kitchen. His rough hands guiding hers as he taught her how to fix broken things. The way he used to say that kindness was the only wealth that truly mattered. She had spent years proving him wrong. Or at least, trying to. The janitor lowered his gaze, ashamed. His voice, when it finally came, was soft and strained, as if each word carried weight he could barely lift. He spoke about a man who had once helped him when no one else would. A man who had given him a job when he had nothing, who had paid for his child's school books when he couldn't afford them, who had told him that dignity wasn't something you earned through wealth but through how you treated others. Serafina felt her throat tighten. That was her father. The man she had convinced herself was weak. The man she had walked away from because she believed kindness made people vulnerable, small, insignificant in a world that rewarded power. Yet here was a stranger, a poor janitor, crying as though the world had lost something irreplaceable. And for the first time in years, Serafina wondered if maybe she had been wrong. The janitor spoke of his daughter, a little girl who was sick, whose laughter had slowly faded as medical bills piled up and hope grew thinner. He had come to the grave not just to grieve, but to talk, to ask for strength, to feel close to the one person who had once believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. Serafina listened in silence, her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. She had everything, wealth, influence, control, but standing there, she felt emptier than she ever had in her life. Because no one would cry like that for her. No one would come to her grave one day and speak of kindness. The realization hit her harder than any business failure ever could. The sunlight seemed brighter now, almost unforgiving, as if it were exposing truths she had spent years hiding from. She looked at her father's name again, tracing the letters with her eyes, and suddenly, she didn't feel like a powerful woman anymore. She felt like a daughter who had abandoned something precious. Something irreplaceable. And then, quietly, something shifted. Not in the world around her, but inside her. It was subtle at first, like the first drop of rain before a storm. A thought, fragile and unfamiliar, but impossible to ignore. What if it wasn't too late? What if she could still choose differently? The janitor gathered his things, apologizing softly as if he had intruded on her space, unaware that he had just opened a door she had kept locked for years. He picked up the lunchbox, mentioning that his daughter would be waiting for him, that he needed to be strong for her even when he didn't know how. Serafina watched him stand, watched the weight of his world rest on his shoulders, and for the first time, she didn't see weakness. She saw courage. And it moved her. As he turned to leave, she spoke, not with the authority she used in boardrooms, but with something softer, something she barely recognized as her own voice. She told him to wait, to stay just a moment longer. Because something inside her had already decided. She wasn't just visiting a grave anymore. She was rediscovering a legacy. And perhaps, for the first time in years, she was ready to live up to it. As the morning sun climbed higher, casting warmth over the cemetery, Serafina felt a quiet promise take root in her heart. A promise to help, to care, to become someone her father would recognize again. Not a millionaire. But a human being. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters. Your support keeps these stories alive.